Hi all, and welcome to my first Q&A session of 2017. I'll be answering questions I received through email, Facebook, but primarily Instagram, and there's quite a few, so let's get straight there. Harnaik Singh Mana asks, which routine is optimal to gain size? And I think this is a bit of a recurring question from Harnaik. The simple answer is any routine in which you can progressively overload. So it's not so much to say that there's one routine that kind of smashes all the rest out of the ballpark and one routine is greater than every other routine, but it's more so about consistency and being able to progressively overload week by week and basically progressing the weights lifted. And so long as there's a linear pattern of an increase, whether that be on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, or even a yearly basis, over the course of, let's say, 10 years, so long as the linear line is increasing, you will increase muscular size and strength and all the kind of other benefits that come along with that as well. Generally, routines with higher frequencies work better as well. It's worth noting. So body part splits where you're working one body part once per week is probably a little bit on the less optimal side of the scale. Routines where you're working things like full body or upper lower splits, anything along those lines is probably a little bit more optimal for gains. KJ Samra asks, how to increase your grip strength and increase core strength. One of the greatest exercises, which funnily enough I did last night, was the barbell side hold. So what you essentially do is grab a barbell with one hand only. I'll be overlaying the image now. And essentially from a rack position, you're standing up with a barbell by your side, and you'll find that you need to kind of offset your other arm in the air like a lateral raise, just to kind of balance yourself. But the idea here is to hold the heaviest weight you can possibly hold on a barbell for as long as you can, and usually I'll aim for about 10 to 15 seconds. If the weight is easy enough for you to hold it for 15 seconds, you need to increase the weight. Something like 3 holds on either side is a great way to work the obliques and the grip. In terms of core strength, I like another mix, and that mix is getting into a plank position on your elbows, a typical plank position. And what you find is that your hands are quite free because all the tension's on your elbows. With your hands free, I then like to use hand grips. That's something that I like to do when I wake up. So it just kind of, for me, causes a weakness, and it's like something I'm trying to strengthen up as quickly as possible. And it's the same for the forearms, so it's a great way for me to incorporate both of them as soon as I've woken up. So that's the barbell side hold, as well as the planks with the hand grippers. Hopefully that will help you. K10 Kate asks, can you suggest a couple of strength training programs? I'm currently doing Wendler's 531. Yeah, so we've got Strong Lifts 5x5, you've got Matt August 7x753. I know there's a lot of hybrid routines as well. There's one great one that I always like to recommend, which is All Max Nutrition's Strength and Muscle Hybrid Program, I believe it's called. So there's an abundance of plans out there, and they're all available free, whether you're looking at Dave Tate or any other renowned names in the industry. The key thing, like I mentioned before, is about progression. So it's not per se that there's one routine which is just absolutely fantastic and it's going to get everybody great results. It's more the case that it's about finding something that works for yourself, something with scientific truths behind it, like higher frequency training, splitting up full body workouts or upper lower workouts, which most of these strength routines are. But also it's just about consistently doing it, and then what's going to happen is you're going to find out you're going to gain new weaknesses, you're going to gain new strengths. And then it's kind of just working around that and picking exercises, additional exercises to help you with those weak points as well. Jagga, I believe, asks, how many grams of protein, carbs and fat do you aim for when you're cutting? I always end up losing quite a bit of muscle. Generally, people go towards the side of crash dieting and really restrictive dieting when it comes to trying to lose body fat. So generally, I'd say most people lose a lot of weight. They think they've lost muscle, which is usually muscle that they didn't really have in the first place. It's just size that they thought was muscle, but it's actually kind of like fat and water and stuff. So in terms of what's the ideal parameters, you're probably looking at around about 0.75 grams to 1 gram per pound of body weight, protein that is, and 0.4 grams per pound of body weight of fat. Generally you'd make up the rest of the shortfall with carbs. However, those are just very general guidelines. As long as you're weight training and you're getting enough protein, which means anything above 0.6 grams per pound, something along those lines, you should be pretty much in the safety zone of kind of maintaining the muscle mass which you have. The other thing that needs to be noted is people usually carry more fat than they think. So why is that important? That's important because if you're 75 kilos and you think you're 20% body fat, that means your lean muscle mass is very, very low. However, you think you're going to be very lean at 70 kilos, which is just not the case. So when people are actually losing fat and they're getting really slim and their clothes are getting really, really loose, what happens is they just make the direct assumption that they've lost muscle size when it actually isn't the case. It's just the fact that they started cutting too early when they didn't really even have a foundation of muscle mass yet. So the simple fix is not to worry too much. Get in the gym and get yourself into a great routine, and you'll find that everything else will just kind of work itself around that. So long as your protein and calories is obviously along the right lines, sorry. You can get that along the right lines by using a TDE calculator online. So calculate that, then you can find also macronutrient calculators which will help you, and it's just a case of experimenting really. Gadan asks, I'm also vegan, but I'm struggling with this to get at least 1 gram of protein for 1 pound of body weight. I think he means 1 gram per pound of body weight, okay. I eat a lot of food, but I end up consuming a lot of carbs in the process. How do you meet your protein requirements and still keep control of the carbs? When I bulked in the past, it ends up looking horrible because of all the carbs I get to meet my protein requirement. Do you use a lot of protein powder to avoid this? It's a very, very good question actually. It's a very common thing for vegans. So generally, vegan protein sources, like whether it's lentils or beans or grains, these things come along with carbs. But my question to you is why are you scared of those carbs? Especially it seems like you're trying to bulk up because you mentioned bulking in the past. If you're trying to gain muscle size and strength, carbs is a must. So it's like, why are you afraid of these extra carbs that you are getting along with your protein sources? If carbs is something you are concerned with and you may be trying to reduce your caloric intake, it's probably worth looking for some specialist products like meat alternative products. You don't need to really heavily rely on protein powder. I have half a serving of protein powder, a vegan pea protein isolate per day. So it's nothing crazy. But the important thing here to remember is to question why are you scared of carbs, especially if bulking. And secondly, if your carbs are very high, it's worth keeping your fats low as well. So generally the process for the body to store carbs as fat is very expensive and very inefficient. And because carbs is the body's main source of fuel, it's like if your fats are also very high, so you've got a high carb intake, if your fats are also very high, what you might find is your body just stores the fat because it's using the carbs as the fuel. So generally, people in the know of nutrition will recommend, when they recommend high carbs, they'll recommend low fat, and also vice versa, which is similar to a ketogenic approach. So when they go high fat, they'll recommend really low carbs so that you're using the fat as fuel. But in terms of things to help you, you can get protein powders, you can get bars and cookies and all kinds of vegan kind of protein goods. Also, you can get specialist products like soybean spaghetti, black bean spaghetti, you can get protein breads. Depending on where you are in the world, soya mince and soya chunks are available everywhere, but there's definitely other specialist products like burger sausages and all these kinds of things available, especially in the Western world and Europe and stuff. So firstly, I'd question why you're afraid of carbs. And secondly, I'd just say it isn't really that hard, providing you're getting at least 2,000 calories. If you were getting 2,000 calories a day from grains alone, you'd be getting a decent amount of protein. So as long as you're adding in some nuts, some lentils, some beans, some soybean, you just can't be not getting your required amount of protein. And I think it's just a simple case of overthinking it a little bit, to be honest. Sej Dev Singh asks, so you know how elite gymnasts and weightlifters have very developed upper and lower body musculature respectively. What's your opinion on how they get to that level of muscularity? As in, would they have done long duration hypertrophy cycles to put on muscle to be at that level in the sport, or did they grow by solely practicing and progressing in the organic movements relevant to gymnastics or weightlifting? That's a very great question actually. It's also something we see in sprinters. So you mentioned gymnasts and weightlifters, both of them 100% weightlift. So anybody we're seeing with muscle, any of these athletes that we're seeing, especially at an Olympic level, we can pretty much guarantee they're doing weight training. Whether they're MMA fighters, football players, cricket players, all these athletes that we see, even golfers, are doing weight training just because of the benefits that it has. With regards to gymnasts and weightlifters, I mean, we know for a fact weightlifters do some hypertrophy work. I say it's not a great deal, but there's definitely some hypertrophy elements there. With regards to gymnasts and kind of the calisthenics side of things, the key thing that's working for them is the same progressive overload principle. So it's not necessary for them to do a hypertrophy as we see it, as in terms of in the gym with weights. But you can pretty much be certain they're doing ring pull-ups, they're doing ring muscle-ups, they're doing ring dips, they're doing L-sits, they're doing all of these amazing exercises which are using your own body as resistance. But however, what's important to remember is they're definitely progressively overloading. So they might have started off doing one muscle up on a bar, they moved over to doing it on rings, which it's obviously harder because the rings are moving. Then they're probably doing weighted muscle ups, and all of these things are worth considering. So the same principle of progressive overload applies, and so long as you're lifting more weight over time, even if weightlifters weren't to do any hypertrophy work with regards to kind of time and attention and rep work, so even if they did just singles for a period of 20 years, if they started off at 40 kilos and ended up at 240 kilos, you can guarantee they've gained muscle mass and strength. So I think in that respect, muscle size and strength are kind of hand in hand, and whether they choose to do hypertrophy work in the common the common mindset that we have towards hypertrophy work is really irrelevant, so long as they're progressing. And I think progressive overload is the key here, and that's why calisthenics athletes also have success. They're not progressing in terms of weights week by week, but they're using the same principles of progressive overload, where they're doing 5 pull-ups. At the start of a cycle, they might be doing 5 pull-ups. By the end, they're doing 10. So there's that overload, there's that increased volume, which is vital. Kanwaljit asks, how do you weigh a patka? And I've mentioned that before. I'll be doing a video at some stage of how I tie my patka in the gym, how I tie a Valeti pug, and also how I tie a Patiala Shahi pug in my style. The next question we have from, I believe it's Haxoit. He or she asks, what impacts muscles more? Slow reps, constant weight, or quick reps, increasing weight? It's a very interesting question. We know there's definitely some truth behind increasing set duration. So time and attention has its place for sure. I believe it's somewhere around 30 to 40 seconds of per set, basically, to get the best bang for your buck in terms of creating the muscle hypertrophy response. However, if you want the best of both worlds, which is muscle and strength, there's something to be said for 5x5 style training with heavy weight. You're not only going to get the kind of optimal, I'd say, muscle gain, muscle hypertrophy, but then the strength element along with that, and the kind of the connective tissue benefits as well. So if you're looking to not only build muscle but also be very strong, it's definitely recommended to stick to probably the 5 rep region and go for 5x5 style training where you're using heavy weight. However, having said that, it's definitely nice to mix everything up. So do really high rep sets, do 12s, do 20s, even more than that if need be. I think it's more important just to increase the time and attention. So generally sets where you're working for strength don't last very long at all. 10 to 20 seconds, something like that. If you can vary that and work all the rep ranges, your training will not only be more fun, you'll hit everything quite equally and quite well, actually. So I hope that answers your question. Giri Shetty Anu asks, if I remember you don't prefer dairy products, is that because you're lactose intolerant, or do you recommend others to avoid it too? It's not about preferring dairy products. In fact, I love Greek yogurt more than the next guy. Over a year ago now, so November 2015, I believe, I went vegan for kind of like ethical reasons. So it's not about whether I prefer it or whether I recommend it to others. I don't push it on anybody, but just for personal reasons, I'm vegan. Happy Nitish asks, please tell me how to reduce fat from the face. I eat a healthy diet and work out daily. Generally, I'd say you just need to continue what you're doing. I don't have any stats or any of your kind of information about what you're currently doing, so I can't really recommend anything. However, What I will say is just stick to eating more fruits, vegetables, lentils, beans and nuts. Getting those down, managing your stress, managing your sleep and working out however you feel best. Generally, I really recommend walking 10,000 steps every day as well for anybody interested in fat loss. So once you've got those things down, consistently keep doing that, manage your portion sizes and you should be fine. Khalsa Soldier asks, how much cardio do you do? Are you running on a treadmill? And do you do supersets when you train, and find out what's the best rest time between sets? I'm going to answer the last one first because I think it's really interesting. I was reading the other day that rest time really doesn't matter, and I've kind of said this for the longest part of my training time as well. Because I really enjoy training for strength, sometimes my rest between, especially on the routine I'm doing now, the rest between my sets can be very long. So the recommended by Matt August on the routine I'm doing currently is 5 to 12 minutes. Now, some people would probably say, well, you're not getting the best benefit in terms of your workout and all of that business, but we know from the research on training volume, so long as you're getting the volume in, and what I mean by that is, if I'm scheduled to do 3 sets of 5 with, let's say, 100 kilo squat, it doesn't really matter whether I do 15 reps in one go or whether I spread out 3 sets of 5 every half an hour. You are going to get the best benefit. However, you are going to get the benefit from doing both. You're going to get an equal benefit from doing both. However, having said that, if you're doing 3 by 5 in one go, which means you're doing 15 reps in one go, you're fatigue inducing, which means you're building up a lot of fatigue compared to doing 1 set of 5 in the morning, another set of 5 in the afternoon, another set of 5 in the evening. So it's really interesting, the research that is coming out on this at the moment, and generally they are saying it doesn't really matter how long you rest, so long as you're getting that work done. And that's what I find really interesting. Your second question was, do I do supersets when I train? The simple answer is yes. It just depends which routine I'm doing. Right now, it's a very strength focused routine on the first exercise and the first exercise alone. So the rest, because the first exercise can sometimes take up to an hour, just depending on the kind of set and rep scheme. The rest of the session we do tend to speed things up. However, having said that, there's not many assistance moves in the routine I'm doing currently. So the one I was doing previously, everything was supersetted. So I do things like pendlay rows with paused bench press. I do things like chin-ups and dips. I do things like front squats and ab wheel rollouts or something along those lines. Supersets work really well. They're great for saving time, and they're great just for speeding things up, increasing your fitness. The first question you asked was, how much cardio do you do? Are you running on a treadmill? I don't do any running on a treadmill. I'm just not a fan of running at all, really. Cardio for me is probably something like doing timed workouts with an Olympic snatch. So maybe doing something like 3 reps every 20 seconds, something along those lines, something that I actually enjoy. In the past, I've done wrestling, I've done football, I've done swimming. So these are things that I kind of throw in now and again, but generally walking is something I do. I do a little bit of a spin bike every time before I go into my weights room. And I'm trying to walk more as well. That's definitely something I'm trying to improve. But generally, I'd say no conventional cardio really, which is quite a bad thing if I'm going to be completely honest and self-critical. The more success you're having with your cardio and the better your cardiovascular system, the more potential you basically have for gaining muscle and strength. So it's a complete misconception to think that that's only going to kind of hinder progress. If done correctly, like 3 incline walks a week lasting half an hour each, something along those lines, and you're bringing your resting heart rate down and your overall capacity up, that's only going to benefit your weight training. Deepak Verma and Marshall both ask about fat loss. I think I'll be making a very in-depth video to fat loss because it's something that's obviously, it's the #1 goal for people that go to the gym. Both of you guys, I don't know anything about what you're currently doing, your lifestyle or anything like that. Generally, I can make the assumption you're not walking enough, you're probably eating too much, and you're not working out with weights. So the first thing to do is try to get an app on your phone which is going to track how many steps you walk. Walk something like an hour a day, or roughly 10,000 steps. Increase your fruits, vegetables, lentils, beans and nut consumption. These are 5 great things. And also try to work out with weights. If you have a gym available to you, get in there, see a personal trainer, get something going with in terms of beginning with goblet squats, learning how to deadlift, how to squat, how to lift a weight above your head safely. These sorts of things, get going on the harder exercises, because that's going to help you with long-term fat loss as well. But generally for now, I'd say get active, control your nutrition definitely is a high priority. And Gunam Singh asks, I have one question, I'm vegetarian. Which diet is better for vegetarian in which I gain everything like protein, carbs and fiber? Baji, I've got no idea what you mean by that, to be honest. Meri advice hai hi you should download an app called MyFitnessPal and try to track with tusi ki khanne what you're eating every day basically. So if you put in there 2 wholemeal chapatis with elephant atta, for example, it's going to come up with a rough estimate of what that's giving you in terms of carbohydrates, fiber, fat and protein. By tracking, you're then able to look at what you're eating and try to pick out what's wrong or what's right, and then it's probably worth seeking the advice of a professional. You're not at any disadvantage of being vegetarian. It's just a case of you need a little bit more understanding of nutrition, so definitely seek somebody's help, I'd say. Raman says Veere abs both India kari diya paji, but the honest truth is that it's very much genetic dependent. Raman asks, if you want to build muscle and lose fat simultaneously, do you have to eat a caloric surplus or deficit? Great question. The newest research I think I've seen showed that in beginners a caloric deficit was completely fine, where people lost a great amount of fat and built muscle at the same time, providing their protein intake was high and providing they were progressively overloading at the gym, which means just lifting more in kind of a linear fashion. So that's very interesting to see for beginners. I'm not sure what's the cutoff point for that, so can somebody who's been training for 10 years build muscle and lose fat at the same time? I'd probably argue no. But for beginners, so I'd say anything, if you've been training for any time under 5 years, you're pretty much still categorized as a beginner. Yeah, I'd say you can do that at a deficit, that is. Okay, next question I had on my Facebook page from Justice MV. He says, great to see Singhs such as yourself inspiring our community to get into real fitness and health. Thank you, brother. The best recommended assistance exercises with sets and reps while doing 5x5. This is a really good question, and I had to quickly look at the 5x5 routine. To be honest, it's quite a wholesome routine, meaning you're covering everything over the course of the week. And the important thing here is just because it's only a 3-day routine, you want to make sure you've got full energy for these 3 sessions. And I think this touches a little bit on your next question as well, which is any recommended exercises like running or using lighter weights on days in between doing 5x5. What I'd kind of ask you first is, or propose first, is that if you're asking for things to do on your days off, generally I'd say you're probably not giving all to your days on. So because it's a 3-day routine, okay, you're not in the gym that much, however, you need to be there and you need to be present and you need to be 100% giving everything you've got to these 3 sessions. And I'd say if you are doing that with something like a routine where you're squatting 5x5, 3 times per week, I'd say your weights are probably too low, or if it's the case that your fitness is very high, and I've just made an assumption that you're kind of not doing it properly. If your fitness is very high and you're doing it completely fine, then I'd say probably like walking is a great thing to do on any day off. Generally, you don't want to pick any exercises which are only going to make your fatigue higher. You want to enhance your recovery. Walking, swimming, doing farmers walks, things like that are really great for that. In terms of your recommended assistance exercises, it really just depends what you're weak at. So that the whole idea behind assistance exercises is not that one size fits all. It's that, for example, myself and my training partner are quite weak off the floor on deadlifts, so we're really trying to work on leg strength. We're doing leg presses, we're doing sled work, we're doing stiff leg deadlifts to make sure that we're basically utilizing as much hip and leg drive as possible, lifting off the floor. So it's very much individualized in that sense. If you're finding that on a front squat, what's happening is you're kind of coming forward like that, then we need to strengthen up the core. So Generally, I'd say I'd stay away from the sit-ups and the crunches that they've recommended in that routine. I'd probably go for cable face pulls every session, just to keep your shoulders healthy, keep your your side delt and your rear delt working great. And also I'd recommend planks. So tension planks are fantastic. You're basically getting into a normal plank position, elbows and toes on the floor. What you're doing is you're imagining your elbows moving towards your toes and your toes moving up towards your elbows, in the sense that you're squeezing as hard as you possibly can with total body tightness. That's also a fantastic exercise which you could probably get away with doing 3 times a week as well. Other exercises, I'd probably throw in chin-ups as opposed to pull-ups, just because I prefer them. And I'd also probably throw in dips with that superset. But I'd say working the abs every session as an assistance can only benefit you. I've never ever heard of anybody having a core that's too strong. So anything banded, you can do standing banded crunches, you can do tension planks, and probably things like farmer's walk will be really useful as well. But in terms of an assistance move, I think it just really depends on you and your weakness. Maybe if you can send me some videos, I'll be able to advise you better. I do believe that was it for this week's Q&A. I will be making another video very shortly addressing some very frequently asked questions. So if you'd like me to answer anything for you, just simply comment below or hit me up on Instagram through DMs, or sometimes I do a Q&A post. So I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope the information was very useful.